Good afternoon. This is the first broadcast of Orville Brown on YouTube. My subject today is Socialist Wolves in Sheep's Clothing. The success of any system of government, of any method for the management of public affairs, is always based on production. It is based on that system's ability to produce wealth that builds nations and meets human needs. The best such system is one that unleashes human energy and invention and that properly compensates workers. These goals have been most spectacularly achieved in the democracies, large and small, from Scandinavia to Germany to Costa Rica, Malaysia, Singapore, Botswana, and Barbados. These are states with competitive political systems. These are states where the means of acquiring wealth are in the hands of private persons. These are states where anyone who has a viable idea and works hard can go from rags to riches. These are states that provide the best programs in health, education, and social upliftment. There are 87 full democracies among the 195 states in the world. Citizens who live in democracies often take their success for granted and remain silent when power-seeking groups and people like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez cry down the democratic system and claim that the goals of human development may be more easily achieved by changing from democracy to socialism. This is not true. Under the socialist system, one single socialist party dominates political life, and the means of acquiring wealth are owned by the government. The socialists always make wild claims of free services like free buses, free child care, and cheap grocery stores to win power. But when they win power, they take those promises back. They can't keep their promises because the socialist system is never able to produce the wealth to pay for the benefits. They promise you a feast and give you a stone. The socialist system fails to create wealth because government ownership puts a bridle on human energy and invention. The socialist system fails to produce because men will not work to create what they cannot own, and there is no motive for hard work and invention. Men working without trade union protection or fair wages simply go through the motions of effort and produce very little. In the old socialist days in Russia, the workers used to put it this way: as long as the bosses pretend that they are paying us a fair wage, we will pretend that we are working. Between businessmen not being able to own anything and workers being paid little or nothing, socialism is always a failure. That is why the Soviet Union collapsed. That is why Cuba can't keep the lights on. And that is why Venezuela went from being the richest country in Central and South America to become the pauper of the Americas. Socialism destroyed many third world countries and held Eastern Europe in chains for 47 years. Now that the infection has started in New York City, we must stop it in that city and make sure it never becomes a pandemic in America. Because there is no successful socialist state in the world, socialists like Bernie Sanders and AOC advance their cause by claiming that the democracies in Scandinavia are socialists. Bernie and AOC appear in the democracies like sheep, but they are wolves in sheep's clothing. People are persuaded to go socialist, and they go from wealth to poverty, and they end up like Venezuela. But the wolves can't deceive you, can they? You know a sheep is not a wolf. you can see that a bee is not a wasp. And you are aware that ivy and poison ivy are not the same thing. You realize that Scandinavia is not socialist. Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Finland cannot be socialist. They cannot be socialist because there are competing political parties in those states. Scandinavia cannot be socialist because the means of acquiring wealth are not owned by the government but by private persons. Scandinavia cannot be socialist because it has the wealth to deliver generous social benefits, and the socialist countries cannot. The outcomes from democracy and socialism are as different as the night is from the day. Freedom as opposed to control, wealth as opposed to poverty, and filled pantries as opposed to emptiness. But the socialists are not truly concerned with outcomes. The holy grail they pursue is power, and they will offer any deception to win it. If you thought Scandinavia was socialist, don't take my word for it that it is not. Just listen to Lars Løkke Rasmussen, former Prime Minister of Denmark, as he addressed Harvard students about the Nordic or Scandinavian model in the spring of 2015. Quote, "I know that some people in the US associate the Nordic model with some sort of socialism. Therefore, I want to make it clear that Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy." Unquote. Let me repeat that. I know that some people in the US associate the Nordic model with some sort of socialism. Therefore, I want to make it clear that Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy. Pretending that Scandinavia is socialist is not the only trick up the socialist sleeve. They also try to separate themselves from their failed systems of poverty and oppression. One group, Bernie and AOC, call themselves democratic socialists. What is democratic socialism? Democratic socialism is nothing but the Trojan horse that socialists use to take power in the democracies. What happens when socialists succeed? They suppress the democratic parties, they mismanage the economy, and they turn wealth into poverty. That is what happened to Venezuela in a decade. That is what happened to Nicaragua. That was what happened to Poland and East Germany under socialism. Poland and the former East Germany, thank God, were liberated from socialism in 1991 and now prosper as democracies. Right now in America, socialism is being tested by the election of Zoran Mamdani as mayor of New York. He got elected by promising free bus rides, free daycare for kids, and free grocery stores in the bargain. He is already walking back the promises, as socialists always do, because socialists can't deliver what they promise. The people of New York who sang his praises will soon be spitting him out. He will go to the dustbin of history as another socialist failure, another wolf exposed in sheep's clothing. The next chapter of democratic socialism in New York will open with Mamdani seeking scapegoats for his failures. He will blame Donald Trump. He will blame the billionaires. He will blame the Republicans. He will blame the previous mayor. Making excuses and dodging of blame is all part of the socialist playbook. It is never that socialism is unworkable. It is always the fault of the enemies of socialism. So we must stop the infection in New York and prevent it spreading to the rest of America. There's another cautionary tale of socialist failure. And that tale is something that all students of political philosophy should bear in mind. It is that when socialists run out of enemies to blame, they sometimes take down the whole system with them. That is the tale of the People's Temple cult led by the American evangelist Jim Jones. When he found that his apostolic socialism was not working in America, he transferred his people to a socialist paradise in Guyana, a formerly British territory right next to Venezuela. When that didn't work out either, he persuaded his followers to engage in a mass suicide in 1978 that killed 912 American citizens. Mamdani is of the same mind as Jim Jones. The difference is that he will never be allowed the extreme controls of his spiritual brother Jim. Let me end by reminding you that Scandinavia is not socialist, and that Bernie Sanders and AOC are socialist wolves in sheep's clothing. They seek power by pretending that socialism is a guarantee of the good life and then lead people to the hard life. They don't care what your life will be, because what they want is power, and they will tell any lie to get it. If you want to ask the truth about socialism, ask the people who fled Venezuela. Ask the people who fled Guyana. Ask the people who fled Jamaica under the regime of Michael Manley. And very soon you will be able to ask the people who flee New York City. What socialism delivers is not free buses, free daycare, and cheap groceries. What socialism delivers is food shortages, unemployment, and suppression of human rights. They promise you bread and give you a stone. Let me end by repeating that important statement by the former Danish Prime Minister. Quote, "I know that some people in the US associate the Nordic model with some sort of socialism. Therefore, I want to make it clear that Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy."